So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those that are already in their afternoons. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. And we are at Wizeline are really happy you are here with us, and we are pretty sure you will learn new things and during this webinar, and this hour will be a great use of your time. So starting, I want to introduce the panelists. We have Ana Costilla joining from the Wizeline team at the data Wizeline team at Barcelona, and she has really a good background in data science and data engineering. She has been working at Wizeline for more than 3 years with 10 and more years of experience, and lately she has been working with a top media company there in Barcelona. Ana?
Hi everyone, happy to be here.
We also have Carlos, our principal data engineer at Wizeline. He's now living in Portland, Oregon in the US, and he has been at Wizeline for more than 3 years and has more than 12 years of experience. And lately he has been working with a large US retail partner.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you.
And then it's me, Luis de Alba. I'm the head of the data practice here at Wizeline. I have been 2 years at Wizeline, and I have around 12 years of experience. But okay, let's move. And here is our agenda. We're going to start talking about who is Wizeline, in case you don't know. Then we're going to talk about the data growth that we are seeing lately, and the data journey, what is our cloud approach, and what are our plans to modernize your data warehouse. And then we have a section of Q&A at the end. And I'll ask you to please ask questions. You can use the Q&A capability of Zoom using the chat. And we will be sure to answer the questions either during the webinar or just wait for those complex questions at the end and answer them. And I'm sure we will go back to you. Also, as you know, we're recording the webinar and we will get in touch afterwards. And please keep in mind that this webinar is for all backgrounds, all companies, industries, but it's going to have some examples about retail. But that doesn't mean it does not apply to you. It just means that it can be applied also to your own needs. Okay, let's move. Who is Wizeline? What about Wizeline? Yes, so we're a software company, software development design company, and we have operations in North America, the US and Mexico. We have operations in Asia Pacific, Australia, Vietnam, Thailand, and also Europe, in Spain. And we really love to partner with global enterprises and startups to make their digital journey and digital objectives a reality. And this includes data, of course. And we help modernize their data capabilities, take advantage of their long data they have been capturing, and of course, make the best out of it. And by the way, do you know that Wizeline has more than 700 engineers and globally located, and data is one of the fastest growing practices nowadays, okay? And although Wizeline is cloud agnostic, this time we will be talking about Google Cloud, as we truly believe in Wizeline and Google are at the right spot to help you modernize your data capabilities, okay? Let's talk about the team, the data team. Our data team is growing really fast, as I mentioned before, and hopefully we will end the year with more than 50 data engineers, let's say, in this great team. And inside the data team, we have three dimensions, we will say. Like, we have the data engineers, okay? The data engineers are focused on creating the ETLs, talking about scale, talking about all that happens behind the scenes that will make the data available for the next step for the data analyst and the data scientist. So we have great capabilities there. This is some examples of the tools we use. And then we have the data analysts that are like experts on data warehousing, KPI reporting, business intelligence, get to know the business and see how you need to accommodate your data and present that to the data owners, let's say. And we have the data scientists that are like the experts in machine learning, artificial intelligence, creating models, preparing those models, solve difficult problems, optimization problems, and prepare those models to be put in online for your usage. So this is our team, our data team. Okay, so let's start talking about data growth. What is happening with data? Okay. since the beginning of time, as humans, data has been, like, let's call it mission critical. It has been important for us to capture data, use the data, and try to make predictions with the data. If you think about it in agriculture, like in the early times, it was good to know when it's going to be the rainy season, when it was the best time to plant or harvest something, and then, of course, to see if it's going to be dangerous being here or there, depending on the time, on the season. And then if we move to later times, navigation, of course, become like really dependent on data, knowing your stars, knowing where you were going, knowing like winds. It was important to keep track of all that so that you can speed up your commerce and of course, optimize your routes. If we move to the 1900s and 2000s, of course, talking about manufacturing is super important to keep everything, supply and demand, optimization problems, and keep everything running. It just depends on data. If you think even about this Toyota just in time, everything is about data. If you don't have data, you cannot really optimize anything or keep track of things or even know what is really happening at your plant. And lately, if you think about all the research that is being done, it just depends on data. We as researchers, just having one or two samples is not enough to really come out with something useful. If you think about the COVID-19, nowadays, it was so new, like a new disease that we didn't know anything about it, that we haven't been able to respond in the right way. But as time passes and we keep collecting data, we're going to be able to make the right responses and, of course, find possibly a cure, hopefully. Okay. And just thinking about the world, how it's generating data. We are data generators, are data gatherers. We love to generate data and we love to keep data. Think about yourselves, like how you used to keep all these codes that you're not even using, but you want to keep them because those are your records. You want to keep that. As humans, we are generating plenty of data. For example, in 2018, we generate 33 zettabytes of data, and it's expected that by 2025, we're going to be generating 175 zettabytes of data. But what does it mean? Like one zettabyte means 1 trillion gigabytes. That's a lot, but exactly what is that? How much amount is that? If you think about the humanity, how long we have been spoken, if we record all that information, like since the beginning of humanity's spoken words all the way to 2003, we have been generating 42 zettabytes of data for all the time. But then in 2025, we're going to be generating just like almost 3 to 4-fold that information in one year. Okay. But what it means, like we are saving data. We keep track of all this data. We love to save it, but we are not using it. Lately, we have this study that says like around 69% of the companies, although they are saving data, they don't have a data-driven organization. They know how to save it, but they don't know how to use it or explore it or expand it and use it to their benefits. And around 71%, they don't have even a data culture. So their decisions are still being made the way they have always been made. They don't use data to improve the way they work, the way they make decisions, or to focus in a better place. Okay. Think about retail. Retail is a nice example. They have been saving plenty of data for a long time. They have been one of the top users of data, if you want, but they haven't really explored that. Although they have been using data for a long time, as I said before, and we have a really nice example. I don't know, Carlos, can you tell us a little bit about what happened with Target some years ago?
Yeah, I think that's a good example. Target, there is this story, I think it was around 2010, 2012 that came out. It's part of the Power of Habits book, but they describe a situation where Target was actually trying to use machine learning pretty early on to improve their sales. And they found that people are more willing to change the brand or the change that they buy with when they are pregnant or they are about to have a child. So they started to try to, based on the purchases, try to say when the family was almost kind of ready to have a child or something. And they started sending marketing publicity to a family, and the father of the girl didn't know that she was pregnant. So he asked Target to stop sending that, and why were they sending all of that? And they stopped, of course, but later he came back and he said, okay, apparently, yes, we actually need those coupons that you were sending and all of that. And it's kind of a creepy and funny story at the same time, but really what it shows is that there is the potential to use the data and actually give better services. Maybe not that particular use case, but similar ideas and better ideas can come out. And if you actually explore the data and extract the information, you can improve your business, right? But most clients of us haven't been able to actually do it. And I think that that's kind of what we want to help them with.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we want. We want to help to untape that power you have with all these data. Okay. So let's talk about the data journey. And here I'm going to invite Anna to start talking about this.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the data journey. We've been saying that data has been recorded and has been important since the beginning of time, but the way that it's important has changed. And now we're facing this proposed model with 5 new areas in which you can evaluate how you're doing with your data, right? So the first one is that your data diversity. With this data diversity, you know, you have data coming with some timings and, you know, from how many different data sources are you actually getting the data and mixing it up so you can get like great insights and build amazing models for your company. Then we switch into the infrastructure agility, right? And especially those who are actually in the process of modernization. You know, you come from a BI company that had on-premise services, right? So by on-premise, I mean that the IT department would buy servers and racks, and you would like, you know, set up things there. Most of the time you're like, you know, handling, making it, keeping it alive, and part of your budget goes to actually buying the hardware, right? So you need to be more agile to respond to this increase in data that you're having that's growing exponentially, as Luis mentioned. Then you have the analytics and support, right? Because now what we want is for more people to be able to gather insights from all the data that we're collecting, right? Be it in your data lake or in your data warehouse. This information, this data is going to be useful in relation to how much it's actually activating business decision or like being translated into business actions. Finally, and very related to that, you have the sharing and collaboration, because this is going to help you have your different business areas also better aligned to what you have, right? So like how we see it is that they can share the outputs. And one of the most important areas that has been surging lately is data governance and security. So to be able to know how you got to these numbers, so like how many transformations these values underwent for possible areas of you know, improvement, and then also how secure is your data, how open are you for data attacks or hacking, and how can you make sure that you're getting the best data of it, the best outcomes of your data, but only you and not other organizations. So all these 5 different areas, you can evolve differently in these paths, but usually you go through 4 different maturity stages that are proposed in the next slide. The first one is, you know, the traditional maturity stage. So in this one, you know, you have your BI department that has, you know, there's Snowflake data model, you have relational data sets, you know your data, your internal data, you're probably reading from your EMR and your CRM, and you're ingesting it there, you have dashboards, right? And this used to be a very solid and good solution, but with this increase of data, you need to modernize, right? So you start modernizing and evolving, and you start to, instead of dedicating most of your time to optimizing what you're doing, you start to actually integrate not only on-premise services, but different other data sets. You probably already created a data lake that's feeding your data warehouse, and you're starting to support analytics and storage, and you move to a columnar storage instead of OLAP and structured data, just because like it's gonna be making like the queries run faster, so you are no longer gonna have to wait 5 hours to get the result for a business question that one of your business heads has and needs to know the answer before they can make a decision, right? So you're moving to a fast pace. And it's at this point in which you go through this like inflection point. And I think Zubieta can really talk to us about how we support and we can help in this change for alignment of business decisions and communications, and how we've been managing that in Wizeline.
Yeah, sure. I think that exactly is the best point for like Wizeline to participate sometimes, because we, like most companies, may already have this traditional kind of infrastructure and setup, and then they usually start kind of trying to, as Wicho was saying, gather more data or kind of get the more data to be able to provide better features or increase the kind of capabilities of their product or services. And the problem is that once you have all of the data, then you actually need to be able to use it, but at the same time, because you have more variety and more types of data, kind of all of those integrations and kind of be able to scale everything kind of becomes more cumbersome. And it's in this place that if you are able to embrace the kind of the cloud scalability and management capabilities, then you will kind of be in a better place to grow more naturally in the future and to expand your features and so on. And I think that is, it's usually kind of a roadblock, or it's not a roadblock, it's more like a bump in the road that you have to kind of go through. And I think that that's where we have the experience to help you understand what are the trade-offs that you will have to make, and kind of how this is going to be pretty much adjusting to your use case, and what are probably the easiest ways for you to integrate or to migrate your existing infrastructure and your existing solution to a cloud-based solution, so it can grow more naturally. So I think that that's exactly the best point where we can actually help you.
Yeah, precisely. And then, it's after this bump that the company like undergoes a paradigm shift. So the way that the communications happen and the way that things just kind of like move data-wise, just like is revolutionized. So now you move to a modern stage, which is your third stage. And in this stage, you've already like passed the inflection point. You've already made sure that all the solutions are compatible between each other so they can better feed your data warehouse. That's what your data analysts and your scientists are using to create their models. And, like you've done some proof of concepts of different like predictive tools that you want to have for text, because now you're capable of having unstructured data and not just like tables and like very structured data, because you're ingesting from your data lake. And you're integrating external data, and then your new challenge is having real time, and so you start combining real time and batch processing. And you're doing this in a massively parallel infrastructure, which means that you're no longer worried about having the ability to scale, because this is already like handled by you, either for the ETL section or, for the analytics section in your data warehouse. Finally, the ideal stage is to be in the advanced and the modern and like the cutting edge of things, right? In which everything's coherent, everything is responsive. And one of the key parts of this is that it has permeated all your different business areas. So you have crystallized as a data-driven company, and everyone, no matter the level or their skill of their skills or the organization unit in which they are at, they are enabled to do data analytics pertinent to their business needs. So in the next slide, the idea of this slide is to see that how much advance you've had in all these 5 different areas of evolution. It's going to depend on your business needs, right? So for example, if you're a company that is, like retail, so you have exploiting, income, probably you want to invest a little bit more, and you have invested more into having the infrastructure agility of things, just because you want to be able to respond to like spikes in demand and spikes in data incoming. But for example, if you're a financial institution, you're probably a little bit more advanced and in later stages for your data governance and data security than necessarily the infrastructure or the sharing and collaboration, just because you're more worried about like keeping data safe and just perfectly contained because you have a different use case. So overall, it's not like straightforward. And I think, Luis, you can talk to us about how like the clients can realize that there are more dimensions in this, right?
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes as Wizeline, we start talking with clients and we want to define where they are at these different dimensions. Usually they start sharing us that dimension in which they have the highest number. For example, in this example that we're showing, for example, they shows, okay, we're modern because we have this infrastructure agility. And then when we start checking, it doesn't mean like once you are in a level, you are in all dimensions, you have the same level. They are independent. And this is really important for each organization to understand what is happening in each one of these dimensions. And that's something we try to do with each client so that we can tell them the real story of what is happening. Okay.
Yeah, great. So now that we've seen how you can evolve, even particularly when you've already had some on-premise services and you're like getting into the cloud, let's talk about the cloud approach. And Carlos is going to be walking you through that.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So yeah, I think that it's my turn to talk about kind of what does it mean to move to the cloud, right? What are the benefits that you will get and the trade-offs that you will have to make, right? So the very first thing is that usually you care about all of these dimensions that we talk about. You have a lot of these challenges, and you usually, if you are kind of the decision maker and you have to design a solution for your company, you have to kind of create the balance between providing enough capacity for growth. You have to create kind of manage the budget, because if your data grows twofold, you don't want your budget just to increase twofold. Otherwise, you may not be able to kind of grow, kind of sustain in a sustained way, right? Then you have, of course, as new systems are kind of developed or integrated into your solutions, you don't want the data to be just kind of contained in those systems and not be able to share them and to actually compute with all of that. So that's something that we want to do. And then the last thing is that you want to be able to guarantee pretty much that your data is secure, that your data is not going to be stolen, that your data is not going to be misused, right? If you have private data, then you want to be able to actually guarantee, let's say, compliance with GDPR or similar policies, right? So those are challenges that you have to think about when you are proposing a solution. So in the next slide, I think that I want to make the point that legacy systems tend to focus mostly on kind of one or two of those dimensions, but they usually don't play well or they don't scale well across all of them, right? So for example, sometimes if you have like data growth and you have like on-premise, an on-premise data warehouse, if your data grows, you will have to add more machines to your system, and you will have to maybe have more engineers managing those machines, and then your budget will grow with that. Your expenses will grow with that. It will become kind of, as they grow and grow, you will have more operational overhead, and then of course you will have kind of more challenges trying to integrate everything, because sometimes they are not easy to integrate. And then you have to create custom integrations and so on and so forth. And finally, one thing that pretty much no data warehouse has right now kind of out of the box is kind of real-time insights, right? Usually, classically, everyone had this kind of 12 to 24 hours, if you were lucky, kind of cycle where you will gather the data of the previous day, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that those are the disadvantages of the legacy systems. In the cloud approach, in the next slide, I think that I want to make the point that in reality, you don't have to sacrifice all of those because that's exactly what the cloud tries to solve. It tries to give you a solution that will round up everything and will help you take care of all of the dimensions at once and not have to sacrifice one to gain the other one. So in general, they usually handle capacity, budget, they allow you to have kind of centralized data or shareable data. And of course, they provide security for you out of the box in most cases. So you don't have to think about that. So in the next slide, please. I think that one of the most important elements of moving to a cloud environment is that you gain a base of integration that maybe wasn't easy or wasn't possible with classical solutions, right? With legacy solutions. So for example, in Google Cloud, you have kind of services to capture data, right? You have PubSub or something like that. There is already integrations that are native to just get data from Google Analytics or from some third-party partners of Google segment, Optimistly or something like that. So that's already taken care of. Then you have the services already there that have the correct integrations to process the data, right? You have Dataproc, Dataflow, you can run Spark, really whatever you want on those services and be able to process the data as it comes. Later, you already have the access to Google Cloud Storage, right, for your data lake, and you can just put all of your data as it's arriving into your data lake and then be able to explore it and to use it either for a BI or for machine learning or for whatever purposes you have, even compliance, security, etc. And finally, kind of the central point is that BigQuery, in the case of Google Cloud, is already integrated with all of those technologies. It's really kind of a click away, and you can use BigQuery as your workhorse, right? The engine of your BI and your analytics and power all of your visualizations, which these days usually just work like plug and play. You can bring your Tableau or your Looker or your CSense or whatever, and they will just plug into BigQuery, and your analysts will continue to use the BI tool that they may like, and still kind of you will get all of the benefits of all of the integrations that you have and all of the security that is provided. So that's kind of the I think one of the biggest benefits of the cloud, that all of these integrations already kind of exist and are easy to enable with sometimes with just some clicks. So in the next slide, I want to dig a little deeper into BigQuery's specific kind of features that may make it a little more advanced sometimes than other data warehouses. But really, these are some of the advantages of the cloud in general, right? So the very first thing is that you want a proper data warehouse. You don't want like a half-baked solution, and you get that with BigQuery. The second thing is that, and I think this is a key component, is that it will scale, right? When you choose a cloud solution, you can choose a serverless solution that will scale and work on demand, and that you don't have to manage. You don't have to think about, hey, how many nodes does my data warehouse right now? What is the type of machine that I'm using? All of that, right? And it gets, you get all of the security and encryption. out of the box because it's already integrated with all of that. And then you have all of kind of the real-time and built-in machine learning and the kind of in-memory BI engine that pretty much all of those integrations allow you to get insights faster without actually having to twiddle and kind of create all of those integrations by yourself. So in the next slide, I think that it's a little more clear that really in a traditional model, you have to have people and resources to perform all of these tasks, right? Monitoring, performance tuning, utilization improvements, deployment, et cetera, right? And then because you have to set up some budget for that, then you sacrifice some budget or some resources for your insights and analytics. The idea of using a cloud environment that is serverless, serverless data warehouse like BigQuery is that you don't have to do as much of that to be able to produce the insights. So you can have more resources dedicated to the analytics. So in the next slide, I want to kind of wrap up what is the comparison of what things you usually have to do in a traditional warehouse and how those limitations are kind of removed when you move to a cloud data warehouse, right? So the very first thing that I already mentioned is that you can automate because everything is API based and they provide the SDKs for everything. You can automate and move into kind of DevOps or DataOps systems. You have shareable insights. What you have also, one thing that is somewhat new is that you can actually train some models within BigQuery, and it also integrates nicely with TensorFlow or with AutoML or those kind of systems. So you can get AI without having to create a whole new pipeline used for that use case, right? BigQuery supports kind of pushing data directly into the data warehouse directly in real time. So you can write, I think it's probably like 10,000 writes per second, which is plenty. So you could even push your weblogs directly into the data warehouse without actually having to kind of develop all of this pipeline. So that's actually like, that saves a lot of time, resources, efforts, and so on. And then you can power your insights in real time. Instead of having to wait 24 hours to answer something, you could just wait a couple of minutes and you will get the insights, right? And then to finalize, the last 2 points is that you will have, because it integrates natively with all of the security that Google already provides, you have to just select the right level of permissions that you want, and you can be sure that those will be enforced. So you can adapt the policies to your own kind of needs, but then you know that you don't have to make sure that they are enforced and which mechanisms. You just define them, that's it. And finally, at the end, the operations across the board are going to be simpler for you. So you will be able to spend more time and more resources into kind of getting the insights really. So in the next slide, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about kind of the data warehouse modernization path, right? I think that usually we try to work, and this doesn't only apply to data warehouse or to BigQuery. This is kind of the standard path that we are trying to follow and to work with all of our clients, because we believe that this is kind of probably the best way to guarantee not only kind of we don't want to just try some things and fail midway. We really want to be able to guarantee to our clients and to guarantee the success of our projects, right? So I think that we can talk a little about each of the points, but really the very first piece is that we want to work with our clients to discover and prepare for any migration that you want, right? Any modernization that you want. So we will be able to maybe create like an inventory of things. I think Wicho can talk a little bit about how do we do some workshops and all of that.
For preparing discovery, like the Wizeline way to do this is usually we call it like a foundations workshop, in which we really will get to know our client and identify what they want, where are they at, and how we will solve that problem and create a really valid plan. And these foundations are something like it takes time, but then the results are really, really impressive. For example, during the last couple of months, we have been working with a retailer here in Mexico, and we run a discovery, a prepare and discovery like workshop that lasted like around 8 weeks. But that gave us enough information to make the next step much more like clearer for everybody, including the same company, that they know what they wanted, but they were not really sure how they wanted or what they wanted to do at what time. Okay, so this is one of the cornerstones of this modernization path.
Yes, exactly. And once kind of we have a good kind of understanding of the needs and the current status of the client, then we can create a plan, right? And this is one of the parts that I enjoy the most, because I'm able to work with the client and decide with them what is kind of the right solution for them, right? So we will usually work and create a plan and then create maybe some POCs. For example, in a past project, a client came to Wizeline offices and we spent like 2 days doing hackathons to try different things and to try to prove some bottlenecks that we knew that were kind of the biggest pieces. We actually were able to work together on that, and the results were pretty amazing. The confidence of the client and the confidence to deliver from ourselves was way higher, and then we could actually go and implement things. So once we have kind of all of that plan, then we can go and start pretty much executing, right? And that will be usually, we try to do this kind of green-blue deployments, if you know what that means. But the idea is that we can start kind of moving some of the data and trying some of the integrations, downstream integrations. And once we have those, then we can try to kind of automate things without actually shutting down the main pipeline, the existing infrastructure. And then once we can validate and guarantee that the data that we are receiving in the new pipeline, in the new system, kind of is up to spec, then we can start shutting down some of the pipelines. And then we can do that kind of one pipeline at a time, or maybe in blocks or that kind of things. And as we iterate through that, then it's going to be easier for us to guarantee again that we are pretty much matching the specs or even improving the features that were already available, right? And that's kind of the way we work with this plan. So I think that we have a little more time. There are some questions coming on Q&A. We can go to next slide, and then I think we will spend a couple of minutes before this ends answering those. So just to try to wrap up this, we selected one case study of our past clients. This is for a media company. We created a pipeline. It was probably like an 18-month project because it was really big. Our media client had probably in the tens or probably close to hundreds of publications, and pretty much every publication was managing their own advertisement, DMP, and their own kind of pipeline for publicity in general. And they wanted to be able to centralize and maybe integrate the data across all of the publications to actually kind of get more out of it. So we pretty much helped them move into a centralized cloud project using BigQuery. And I think that during this time, we were able to create a robust pipeline that was serving around, I think we had like 500 million unique users every quarter. And we were processing around like 42 terabytes of data every day. And we were able to help them create customized segments and audiences for their marketing campaigns based on the data across all of their publications, and then be able to actually serve the results of that to all of them again, right? So I think that the team was like a 5 engineers team. So like this is probably one extreme case, but it was really feasible, and it was we were able to actually deliver because we knew that the cloud was going to scale and was going to be easily integrated. And that's what I wanted to share. So I think we have some time for questions. There are a couple of here. I think I will read them out loud, and then we can go one by one. So the very first one, yes, go ahead, please, sorry.
No, before we started with the questions, I'm just gonna move to the next slide in which we share like the way you can get a free assessment, but then so that you can just take a screenshot or just copy the URL while we answer the questions, okay?
Thank you. So the very first question is asking, so we have some compliance needs pretty much, right? They have to be compliant with PCI, and they want to be able to kind of generate this data governance layer. And in the specific case of BigQuery, there are a couple of services that allow you to do that, right? So right now, one recent service, it's called the data catalog. And the idea is that it's a metadata store. But the nice thing is that you can start tagging and adding all of the information that you need on that catalog. So for example, if you had like a table that has PII data, you can go and add the PII tag to that and then apply some rules on top of that. The other mechanism is that, of course, you have all of the IAM policies and the IAM roles. So the power of this is that once you have identified which data has their exact roles, then you can go and apply those automatically or semi-automatically. And then I think the final piece of the puzzle, which is also somewhat new, it's there is a product called data loss prevention. And one of the nice things of the data loss prevention tool is that it can go and sample your columns, and it will tag the columns with the right tag. So it will say, hey, this column looks like has emails, right? So it will add the email tag and the PII tag. And because you created the policy for PII tags, then that column will be maybe only visible to people that has that exact permission, right? So that's one of the nice things. And I think that Google in general is trying to mature those solutions, which is pretty nice. And I think that, I mean, if you want, we can talk later and explore kind of more in detail those solutions. The next question also asks about, hey, is a column database an OLAP database? And is an OLAP model considered a legacy way of building? The columnar database is not an OLAP database. The OLAP database usually try to provide a layer that allows you to create queries super fast, super quickly. I think that that's being replaced, at least in Google's case, by the BI engine capability. Right now, they don't have like an OLAP solution that is standalone. But I think that in my experience, we have been able to provide pretty much everything that the analysts have required without having to go with a custom built OLAP. So I'm not saying that it's like a complete replacement. It will depend on your specific use case, but in our experience, we could, in most cases, replace it. Then we have a question that says, is BigQuery the standard default tool provided as part of Wizeline analytics solution? Not really. That's our kind of solution, the solution that we try to use when we are with Google, right? When usually the client sometimes have already created their own kind of, choose their own provider. So if they already chose Google, then we will use BigQuery. But if they chose AWS, then we'll find a different solution, being Redshift or Athena or whatever.
And then regarding the question about how hard is it to create machine learning models in BigQuery compared to R and Python, in our experience, it depends on the solution. So BigQuery provides a known set of models that you can use. So if you're just starting with machine learning or your analytics and you want out-of-the-box solution, BigQuery is a great way to start with. But if you already have a data scientist in place and you're a little bit more evolved, you're probably gonna keep your Python models being rendered and integrated into your either decision-making dashboards or into your product.
Yes, and one thing to add is that the existing models in BigQuery are mostly for time series data, right? So that fits a lot of use cases, but certainly that is not the case for everything. But it's the integrations that they provide allow you to get data out of BigQuery into Google Cloud Storage or something like that. And then you can plug AutoML, or you can plug TensorFlow or PyTorch or whatever you want. And then you can, if you want to go with, I don't know, recommender systems, or if you want to use like a neural network or whatever, you could actually do that. And the integration is not that complicated, really. I think there is one more question that asks what is a pipeline and how it's constructed. For us, a pipeline means a series of steps. So when you have data, you have to move the data from the place it was created to the place where you will actually use it, right? And the pipeline is the set of steps that will allow you to do that, right? And sometimes you will have in that pipeline to do some cleansing of the data, right? So maybe the encoding of the initial data is not compatible. So you will have to one step that kind of convert the data to the right encoding, or you will do some certain kind of type of aggregation or enrichment, right? So if you were collecting IP addresses, maybe you will want to enrich that with the corresponding, I don't know, place, right, in the map. So you could do that. And those steps is what we call the pipeline. And then how it's constructed is really just, it will depend of the solution and the exact steps that you will need. But in general, we try to kind of do all of these steps that I mentioned earlier. We will have like a collection step, we will have a pre-processing step, and then we will load that into the data warehouse. So the data is available where the insights are being produced. Okay. I don't know if we have any other questions. I think we still have a couple of minutes.
One last question that's about what's the optimal service to analyze time series data? And I would say that the service is gonna depend it's gonna be dependent on your architecture and how well it integrates with what you're trying to provide, more than the different ways that you can tackle your time series data. So BigQuery does have support for data columns and analysis for that. But then also, you know, as Carlos Zubieta mentioned, there are other tools and libraries that have automated machine learning that maybe plug into your data infrastructure a little bit easier. So it's gonna depend on your architecture.
Yes, certainly. I think that one of the advantages of this kind of cloud approach is that, for example, the AutoML service allows you to create the model, define the model yourself, but the actual kind of execution environment is managed. So you can really choose whatever model you want and whatever kind of way to analyze it without having to think about what are the actual machines that are going to run it, right? That's one of the pretty neat things. One more question says that they have a use case regarding kind of a hybrid approach, right? Where they are collecting some ERP data, but they also have some IoT data, right? And for us, in general, what we try to do is to connect both worlds into the data warehouse, right? So you usually will have your standard ETL. We will push it into a data warehouse. We will have another integration pipeline that brings the IoT data, and then you can use the data warehouse of your main engine to actually get all of the information that you need, right? So that's kind of the key pattern that we try to follow when we are using data warehouses as kind of this insights engine, right? I think that we can certainly reach out and discuss kind of more details about that at a later time if you want, certainly. Yep.
No, I just want to say if there is no more questions, I think we want to thank you for your time. And don't forget to take this assessment with you. Take your time, make it a reality, and you will get like really good information around it. And of course, we can follow up and
yeah,
see what you got.
Yeah, I think we still have a couple of minutes. There is just one more question that just arrived, and I want to touch on this. Airflow and Luigi are orchestration tools for exactly when you have your pipeline, you have all of these kind of steps that you want to happen in a predefined kind of orderly manner, right? So you could use Airflow or Luigi standalone, but Google actually has also a recent product. It's called Google Composer, which is a managed version of Airflow. So it already provides kind of the Airflow interface, all of that, but you don't have to think about, again, the machines that are going to run it or the database that is going to be used. You just care about generating the pipelines and defining, let's say, you will have an operator that will say, okay, I want a task that will change the encoding of my data. And then I want a task that, that will take the data from GCS and will load it into BigQuery. So certainly we use those tools all the time, but they are already somewhat integrated in the ecosystem, which is pretty awesome and makes it easy. Okay, I think one last question. Do you think Beam is the best library to create flows? I think this is a little technical, but I think that I think you are referring to Apache Beam. It really depends on your use case. And I think that we can reach out and talk about the specifics of your use case and certainly help you to define the best, kind of the best solution for you. And I think that's pretty much it. Anna?
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. We hope you got some useful insights from that. The Q&A section was really amazing. Do take some time to take the free assessment and, you know, reach out if you have any other salient questions or just want to like talk to us about anything data, because we love all of it. Thanks everyone. See you later.
Thank you everyone.